From interviews to jail calls, Ditto Transcripts delivers fast, confidential, and court ready transcription for law enforcement agencies. Ditto is CJIS compliant and is already working with agencies all over the U.S., including the Washington State Patrol and the National Park Service Investigations Unit. Get started now at dittotranscripts.com. That's dittotranscripts.com. When you don't know how a recruit's really doing until week 10, that's a problem. TrackWired's field training management software replaces old school paperwork with a clean, automated system. Streamlined reporting, knowledge comprehension, and crystal clear performance trends, all handled in one secure place. TrackWire gives you real-time insight into their field training process so supervisors get real-time visibility. FTOs save hours and recruits stay on track. If you want to tighten up your FTO program, start by going to trackwire.com. That's tracwire.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, ladies and gents, welcome back. Today I have retired Chief Jeff Spivey joining us to talk about police culture, wellness, the then, the now, and where we're going in the future. So, sir, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been awesome to learn a little bit about your career, and I just like to start us off with a little introduction, so you can tell us about how you came into police work and a lot of your assignments leading up to leadership, and a pretty big seat to fill, being the chief.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think most of us, I wanted to be a police officer because I thought I could change the world, right? I thought I could go out there. It was all about driving fast, taking chances, putting bad guys in jail, being the hero.
Mm-hmm.
And that seemed really exciting to me as a young kid and graduating high school, going off to college with that goal in mind. But life sometimes doesn't go as planned. I end up getting married while I'm in college, not finishing my degree, needing a job to support my family, and found my way to the Irving Police Department in Texas as a civilian employee at age 19, public service officer that allowed me to really begin engrossing myself into the culture until I turned 21 and could take the test and become a police officer. And, that's really how my journey started. And it was an amazing career after that.
That's amazing, and quite the ascension from civilian 19-year-old to the final stages of your career.
Yeah, so being chief of police was never part of the original plan. I wanted to be a cop forever. I had the great fortune. Irving's a big enough department where we had all of the sections and all of the opportunities. And so I got to work patrol and undercover narcotics, spent some time on a DEA task force doing drug interdiction, spent some time in criminal investigations, investigating burglaries, and then later crimes against persons, and got to work some big homicide cases for our city. And then started that promotion track. I think like a lot of people who promote, you get down to you think that you can do the job better than the people that you're working for. I wanted to be able to call some of the own shots and run my section, run my group of guys and gals the way I wanted to. And so I took that first step and found that I really love leadership and just kept taking opportunities where we were a civil service organization. And so you had to take a promotional exam to promote, and then there had to be an opening at that next level. And I was fortunate to work my way up really quickly to assistant chief. And once I got to that point, it was like, okay, I might as well figure out how to be chief of police, and didn't expect to be chief in my own organization. Applied for a number of positions outside of my own organization. We had a chief at the time that was really stable in his position, and you know, not one to be patient. I started looking elsewhere, but I guess the plan all along was for me to be chief in Irving. And so in 2017, I was appointed chief of police. And man, for the next 5 years, I thought it was the greatest job in the world.
Uh, sir, I don't think I hear that a whole lot. I hear people that ascend to the upper executive ranks, whether it's chief or some version of a chief or even command. And when they look back, commonly, when you talk about the best roles, it's usually a TAC team, like a PROAC or a SWAT team, or like a canine generalist or sergeant, like street sergeant is a common answer. So that's very encouraging, I think, for people that are in a leadership track to hear that chief of police was a fond memory and an experience for you.
Yeah, it's been 3 years since I retired, a little over 3 years since I retired, and I still miss it every day. I miss the camaraderie, the brotherhood. I miss, and nobody prepares you for this, Eric, especially when you're chief of police. But you miss people relying on you. You miss
Mm,
people counting on you to make the right decision, to make the tough decisions, to understand that you're that last line of decision making. And you get addicted to the stress. And I think in our profession, we get addicted to the stress no matter what position we're in,
mm.
because it's what drives us. It's, we're all that type A personality where we thrive on the challenge. And there's no greater challenge in my mind than being a chief of police and having to navigate the political environment in your community, the political environment within the organization, the demands that the job puts on you, and ensuring that the decisions that you're making are truly what's best for the organization, what's best for the employees, and what's best for the community you serve.
Yeah, you said something that I think a lot of people might take pause, but when they reflect on it, they might really recognize and agree with it, which is the addiction to stress. And there's different ways to look at that. There's definitely a healthy awareness, and then there's imbalance, and that's directly tied in with wellness. And so I think that so many people realize that when we come into this job because of purpose, and then it continues to grow because of our experience and because of our roles and such, it does become more and more. And so I'm curious, you clearly have this altruistic reason to lead here, and we know of a lot of examples where it's chasing rank versus you shared like, hey, I see how this is done, I think I can do it better. Or like a lot of people share on or off recording, if it's not me, it's going to be that guy or gal. And so because of the fellas or the team, I'm going to put my name in the hat, and I know I can do it, and I know I have what it takes. How much of your awareness of wellness was alongside you in parallel with your progression and leadership and development?
So I think it played a tremendous influence in my career especially as I started promoting up. I often share when I'm talking about my journey, that first recognition that this was going to be unlike anything that I'd ever experienced before. Me and my partner get sent to a major accident at the beginning of a shift one night, and we get out to the location, and it truly looks like an airplane had crashed in the middle of the road, because there's bodies scattered everywhere. There's car parts scattered everywhere. There's people standing around, and it was total mayhem. And so for the next 8 hours of my shift, I spent, at some point of that, performing CPR on a 15-year-old girl who ultimately passed away, having to tell her parents at the hospital that she didn't make it, having to work the accident, and just go through all of that, and getting back to the station, and getting changed into my civilian clothes to go home for the day, and my lieutenant yelling at me that I seemed like I was out of control, like a chicken with his head cut off, I think was the saying. And if I didn't get my S together, I wasn't going to make it in the job.
Mm,
And it was like, oh man, I thought I had my stuff together. So, I've got to try harder, right? I've got to buckle down, because I'm a 22-year-old kid at the time. I want to have a great career, and I want to make the men and women around me confident in my abilities. And so you just start stuffing all of that stuff down, and you start, trying to overcome those feelings of failure, of letting the community down, of the trauma that you are exposed to, and you don't recognize that you're getting addicted to the way you feel. That, I use the metaphor a lot when I'm talking about health and wellness of the frog in the pot of water.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people who join our profession are that frog that we go into the pot of water when it's room temperature. And slowly throughout our career, that temperature gauge is turned up, and we get used to the temperature, and we get used to the temperature, we get used to the temperature. And ultimately, we boil ourselves to death through stress, through trauma exposure. We try self medication. We do all the things, right? But it doesn't change what we're being exposed to and how it's affecting us. And unfortunately, many times we don't recognize it until it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. You said a lot there, which is that like acclimation to the stress. So our baseline becomes so high. Like we operate in this kind of constant stress. And my wife recently had a conversation. I was dealing with shingles, which is not common for sub 40 years old. But my doc was like, "So what happened?" And I was like, "It's an interesting question to ask." After the conversation with my wife, I was like, I
Yeah.
suppose it's the reason why I'm here talking to you half the time, which is something stress related. And he kind of smirked and nodded. He's like, okay, just to talk about it. But yeah, I'm like, it's just that recognition that I felt fine. Like I felt totally fine. And I would have said a lot of my de-stressing protocol, my health is great, but it's just recognizing how much stress piles onto us because it's normal. It's just how we operate. And so I appreciate you bringing that example into your early recognition and someone, calling you out. However, also recognizing like what the go-to response was back then. And unfortunately it still is now, which is stuff it down.
Yeah, I think we've gotten better as a profession. I think we have leaders coming in, uh, to organizations who recognize that we can't do things the way we used to. This was in the late '80s when I had that experience, and as I progressed through my promotions, I was fortunate to be able to enact some policies and procedures and recommend some trainings to the organization that I ultimately felt would help with burnout, would help with the overall health and wellness of our organization, and had supportive leadership who were willing to say, "Hey, why don't we try that? Why don't we run with that and see if it works?" And I was unfortunate in that I lost too many of my brothers and sisters to suicide, to burnout, to self medication, to DWI arrest and domestic violence arrest because we weren't doing a great job of truly coping with all that we were exposing our people to. And I think it's leadership's primary responsibility to take care of our people, and I think we're getting better at doing that.
Yeah. And you've paid a nod to a couple things I'd want to rewind back to, which is not just when we lose our people, when we lose our team, our partners, our brothers and sisters, it is life, but it's also career, right? And people, you could hear the tone when some people say, "Oh, they threw it away." It's like, but this is not something that happens overnight, and it doesn't happen completely out of nowhere. And so I appreciate you nodding to that, as well as something that you just said, which reminds me of an earlier comment, which is your obligation as leadership to your people. And even as you talked about the challenges and a lot of the rewarding challenge of being chief is recognizing you have two clienteles, you have two customer bases, right? Two groups that you are serving and satisfying, which is the public, the community, and the people in your organization. And I think everyone could quickly find people that hedge really heavily on one and not the other. And I would argue that they are equally important in that role, which is why I have a lot of empathy for senior leaders because it does seem like a very arduous, sometimes impossible task to please everybody.
Yeah, it's certainly a hard balancing act, right? Because there is give and take on both sides. I think what I came to learn as I was chief, and certainly towards the end of my tenure, going through the George Floyd, going through the COVID pandemic, all at the same time, I think I came to the realization that if I can take care of my people, if I make that my primary responsibility, that everything else will take care of itself. We hire good people, we train them well, we supervise them well, but unfortunately, we expose them to the worst that society has to offer. And so we owe them the opportunity to be as successful as they can be. And we do that by taking care of them and providing for their needs. And again, I think that leadership in our profession is beginning to recognize that, especially given the difficulty it is in recruitment and retention of employees. It's much easier to take care of the people we have than go out and find new ones to take their place.
Yeah, no, I think that's a legitimate thought. And have you ever seen those types of questionnaires where you check the box if you've experienced something and it basically tallies up like your likelihood of having post traumatic stress or stress symptoms, right? And so it's like, did you experience a divorce growing up or did your family, right? And then have you witnessed something? And then very
Yeah.
quickly, anyone who's been on the job for like 2 years has far surpassed that, right? But I think that if you were policing through COVID and or, which is usually in tandem with the timeline, the response to George Floyd, like you probably just get an automatic 50 points, rather than ones and twos added up.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, I'm very familiar with those. I've taken them in the past and, quickly thrown them away so that no one else discovered just how jacked up I was. And, you know, fully recognize that that's many of the people that are in this profession. And yet they still show up day in and day out trying to do the very best job that they can. And it's not always easy for them, whether it's community pressure, whether it's political pressure, whether it's leadership pressure. I think it's the most noble profession in the world, and I also think it's one of the most difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of listeners would agree with that, especially either knowing people alongside in the job or doing it themselves for currently or for a time. Now, in your time in law enforcement and ascending through different ranks and roles, I'm curious if there are any wellness measures that you've seen kind of come on. And granted, at this point in time, like there might be a lot of things that you were able to help see and develop in your own agency that are still like they're the bare bones that are not commonplace everywhere in the nation, but things that you think were like the biggest game changers and maybe should be the baseline for people establishing a wellness program in their agency.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I saw early on, we did a great job as an organization of focusing on physical health. It was how strong can we get? How fast can we be? And if we can be the strongest and fastest, then we're going to be okay out there on the street. And we we didn't pay a lot of attention to how well we sleep. We didn't pay a lot of attention to how well we eat. We didn't pay a lot of attention to what we're doing with the stress and trauma we're exposed to. We wanted to get bigger and faster and stronger. And what I've seen over time is, the recognition that there's more to wellness than just physical strength and speed. And one of the things that we were fortunate at the department that I was at in Irving is, we really began to focus on those things that would burn employees out. And we implemented a program that became known as the hard concept at our organization. And I actually stole it from another police expert, John Marks from Cops Alive. I found his website, and he had proposed this principle that was live hard, work hard, die hard. And HARD was an acronym for healthy, altruistic, resilient, and dedicated. And so I developed a training program as an assistant chief around that and put our entire organization through that concept, recognizing that health is both physical and mental, and that's the foundation. That altruism, when you start putting the needs of others, when you start thinking of other people before yourself, I argue that was the vaccine against cynicism. That
Mm.
you couldn't be cynical if you considered others' needs more important than your own. Resilience, everybody talks about resilience these days. A lot of people think of it as physical resilience. Some people think of it as psychological or mental resilience. It's both, and that ability to bounce back, whether you've suffered an injury, you can't do the work that you used to do, or whether you suffered some mental break and are struggling with just why things happen the way they do. How can you get back? And then what we taught about from a dedication standpoint is dedication isn't longevity. Dedication isn't making it to the end of a career. The dedication is showing up on your last day the way you showed up on your first day, and that's a tough road to hoe. That's hard to do. But when we started talking about that organizationally, I think it really changed the mindset and led to a lot of the things that we did after that, developing a peer program, doing heart checkups, and ultimately setting the framework for an entire wellness unit for our organization.
I think everyone can hear those things and recognize how important they are, but then it also gives someone a compass to think about these things. So it's not just wellness for the sake of wellness. I like when there's a methodology and a philosophy behind it, because then it's something to check back against. Like, what are we actually trying to get to? Health. Okay, what does that mean? And you've explained some of those dimensions, right? It's physical and mental and everything in between. And similarly, like altruism, like what that is the purpose. Why are we doing the things we're doing? Like ultimately, and I've said this a few different ways, but we're not talking about wellness just because wellness is cool and it's the buzzword and like we feel good. Like it is so we can do the job with, as you said, this dedication, right? This durability and this resilience to get through all of our time, not just, you know, clocking in, clocking out, but with
Right.
the amount of passion and the service and the intention that we started with. And I think that's one of the most significant reasons why I love to highlight retired folks such as yourself that have such this positive reflection point back on the career, because that is what we that are still in, whether we're 1 month on or we're 15 years in, we should be looking at those folks as mentors and examples, because you have a smile on your face now and you're reflecting positively and being in the hot seat of chief. It says a lot. And right in the 30-year detective or 30-year, road dog that looks back and says, "Man, it was the most fun, and I only retired because it
Yeah.
made sense and it was time. It was time, and I owed it to my spouse." Right? And like, I love those
Yeah.
examples because we need to focus on what's possible and what we need to learn from.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more, Eric. That's well said. That's perfect.
With cynicism, I kind of want to rewind back to that, because that is such a prevailing attitude and this really slippery thing that it starts with sarcasm. It starts really innocuous and really harmless in intention. But cynicism, that is one thing that I believe is truly plaguing our potential in the profession. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and kind of as you started to explain it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole profession, the culture of policing is rooted in and directed towards making all of our employees cynical. And I say that because if you think back to the police training academy, if you think back to being in the FTO program as a trainee, we didn't teach you all the good stuff to look for. We didn't teach you how to look for someone obeying the law. We didn't teach you how to look for, victims who or citizens who weren't doing anything wrong. We keyed you in on how to recognize the bad in the world, right? And so we wanted you to see people who were speeding, who were driving recklessly, who were committing crimes, who were acting suspicious. All of that we taught you had a negative connotation to it. And so when you're taught to look at the world through a negative lens, all you're going to see is negativity. And unless you've developed a truly impervious shield or shell against having that negativity affect you, you're going to become cynical, because if all you see is bad, then all you're going to think in the world is bad. And so we have to, I think, reframe the way we look at our jobs, the way we train our people, and not focus as much on the bad. But again, back to that balance. Yeah, there's bad out there, and that's why you do the job is to protect society. But man, you're protecting a lot of good people who need you and who need you to show up, and you can't lose sight of them just focusing on the bad. And I think that's where that cynicism comes from, is that constant exposure to the negative aspects of the job that we do in the world we live in.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's like what you look for, you're gonna find it. And we are
Yeah,
we can be a stubborn, hard-headed bunch, very task-oriented. So yeah, we're gonna find it. We're gonna find a lot of bad stuff. We're gonna find a lot of unsavory people doing unsavory things. That is the job. It's almost like when you have like a bolo, like a bulletin for like a red Subaru Forester, and then everyone and their mom, apparently there's just fleets of them all over the streets. You're like, seriously, I did not know this car was that popular these days. But they appear everywhere because you're looking
Yeah.
for it. What helped in your experience, like leading Irving and recognizing the intersection of wellness and leadership? Like, what helped get people back to that altruism when you introduce the hard concept?
I think more than anything, it was that recognition within the organization. I had a great friend kind of came up through the department together, and he had a saying that cops were the worst at eating their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think trying to change that culture and focus on the positive, start recognizing from a leadership perspective, start rewarding those altruistic behaviors, those positive aspects of the job, really celebrate the wins that your employees were having, and not being the only time you saw the chief of police or your patrol captain was when you screwed up, but you saw them when things were going really well, and you saw them in there celebrating with you when you made a good arrest, or when you got a commendation from a citizen because of what you did for them, and changing a flat tire, something as simple as that is, when the whole organization rallies around that and celebrates it, going back to what you said, when you're looking for it, that's what you tend to see. And so when you're looking for the good, that's what you tend to see. And what gets celebrated gets repeated. And I think that helped change where we were going as an organization. And certainly I've tried to focus on it as chief of police.
Yeah, no, that's a great tangible experience. And whether you're a first line supervisor or your command staff, like what you get introduced to is all the major incidents, like, and then what you get introduced to is all the things you have to review for liability. So that's wrecks, that's pursuits, that's use of force, and a lot of times these things are not savory, and a lot of times stress is involved. But what about all the other work that we don't see front and center? And I think that's what you're speaking to, is finding opportunities, encouraging that culture where everyone's recognizing the good stuff we want more of, and if you praise it, you're putting it up on a pedestal, and you are encouraging that kind of behavior to increase.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for walking us through a lot of the big concepts that helped guide your leadership philosophy with wellness intertwined. I want to move the conversation and talk about the work you're doing now with Sworn. Can you tell us a little bit about Sworn?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I get into Sworn itself, one of the things that I think leadership needs to recognize, and certainly I tried to implement and embody in my organization, was wellness and health and safety can't be a box that you check. You can't implement a peer program and say, okay, I'm done. You can't implement a chaplaincy program or an EAP program and say, okay, I'm done. It's a matter of trying to provide as many different avenues to health and wellness for your organization as possible, because what you relate to, Eric, is going to be different than what I relate to. And what you might find confidence and trust in to seek out the help that you need is going to look different than what I find that trust and confidence in. And so, one of the things I did was try to bring as many resources and avenues of resources to the organization. And that's what I'm doing now with Sworn, is trying to provide a new resource to the profession that administrators can implement, not to take the place of something that they already have, but to be an enhancement to the programs that they're working on, or to be a building block for ultimately where they would want to see a wellness program go, and using technology to do that. I think artificial intelligence is here. It's not going to go away. It's only going to grow in our profession. I think as in most cases, policing tends to be somewhat late to the game at adopting new technologies. A lot of that's because of the budget cycles that we have to go through, and
Sure.
we tend to be risk averse in taking on new technologies. But it's here and it's only going to grow, and that's the opportunity I have with Sworn, is to use artificial intelligence to really be that behavior change for our employees so that they can manage their own health and wellness.
That's huge. I appreciate you taking the time to underline it doesn't matter what you have. It doesn't matter what you can write up in the year-end summary of all these programs if no one's using them, right? It's like raising the money and getting the approval from council and all that to get this this new indoor range, and if no one's using it, like a lot of good it's doing, right? And
Right.
so it's so
Absolutely.
much more than just having it and building it, but implementing and applying it and having people use it and see value, right? And so if you have a peer support policy, but no one trusts the team because of culture, like that's probably worse than not having a policy. So I appreciate you walking us through that, and then just recognizing that this is additional resourcing. And yeah, I agree. AI is here. I kind of like to talk to people, and I'm not a futurist by any means, but it is a very relevant tool, and like any tool, there's pros and cons. And so it's like the internet, and how do you like deny the power of the internet to change the world? So can you tell us a little bit about what Sworn is and how does it utilize AI to affect wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. It's first of all, it's not an app, it's a web-based program. It's meant for the individual user to use to manage his or her own health. It pairs with a biometric wearable that, I think the majority of the population's beginning to embrace, and whether it's an Oura Ring, an Apple Watch, a Garmin or Whoop, whatever the device is, we can bring that data in for the user to start populating what we call the Sworn Shield, which is really helping the user look at their health holistically. We're looking at sleep, we're looking at nutrition, we're looking at fitness, and we're looking at activities, which is capturing that workload stressors, those personal relationship stressors, the cognition, the finances, all of those things that we typically don't associate with health, but absolutely have an impact on our health. And so when we try to bring all of that data in, we're bringing it in from a biometric. We can pair with a department's CAD and RMS system. So we're bringing that workload in, a scheduling system. So we know the user can see how much they're actually working and what that work is doing from a stress standpoint or a trauma exposure standpoint. Looking at sending out a text message once a day to allow them to really reflect on what the day looked like. How much stress did I experience? How big a jerk was my boss today? And what kind of stress did that cause me? Being able to capture some of that information and then using the artificial intelligence to recognize when things are starting to go sideways. That individual early warning system for me, we talked about the frog in the pot of water. Well, as that temperature starts getting turned up, the AI can recognize that because of your biometric wearable, that the way you're answering the survey, the calls that you've been on, you're not sleeping well, you've quit working out, you've quit eating the way you normally do. The AI can recognize that and not only notify you, via a text message, but attach a resource to that to specifically address whatever that issue is. It's kind of like an artificial intelligence health coach that
Hmm.
is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's constantly tracking and monitoring you and looking out for you and trying to keep you healthy and well so that you get to finish your career the way you started your career, happy and healthy and ready to go do something else.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I've shared prior about my experience with wearables and how it could be extremely informative, but then I recognized my own personality was like to hyper focus on things. But as I say that, and having a conversation with Matt Domyancic, and we went into wearables and biometrics and making sure you get your blood work, all these tangible things, like I'm very much like, yeah, I probably want to ask for one for a Christmas because I want to get something like an Aura ring because of the responses and the accuracy, but then also because we thrive so much off of data in policing, I think we want objective data. We don't just want to be like, okay, cool, I'll do that wellness thing because you said so. Well, what about me? What about my individual circumstances? Whereas what I hear is that if you're wearing this on shift and then I'm going into my profile, I can see how elevated, maybe how much I was in the parasympathetic literally all day. Whereas I went to like one toner, one tone out, drove code one time, but why are my physiology looking like I was stressed literally all day? And maybe
Yeah.
that is an opportunity to recognize, yeah, it might have been that email I got from my boss, and it might have been the fact that I didn't sleep, and also reflecting that data, and then giving me tangible information to kind of shake me like that gentle shake from my AI like, health coach saying, "Hey, man, something's not working. You're feeling it, but here's the information with it."
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, We have the opportunity to bring in so much more data than we've ever had before. And, not that I say data is the end all be all, but if we have it, why aren't we using it? And if we can use it in an effective way that truly benefits us, again, it's just an opportunity to connect with a resource that you may find very helpful. You may use part of Sworn to track your goals with, and you don't care about how you're sleeping. You don't care about the stress that you're going on, but you want to build a fitness habit, and so you use Sworn to build a fitness habit, or you want to start the carnivore diet, and so you build in that aspect of it into your account, and so just however you want to use it that would benefit your health and wellness, it's available for you. And again, just another resource, just like peer support, just like a chaplain's program, an EAP, just something you can utilize as an employee that keeps you where you need to be for the long term.
Yeah, I like how you explain how people may toggle how they use it, what aspects or features that they use, because even as you're teaching about Sworn, I'm imagining two very like rough subgroups, but one being like they know they're supposed to eat better. They know generally, yeah, I eat healthy if I eat more like produce and meat and fresh foods, less processed, yeah. But like I it's almost like they need the data to nudge them in a meaningful way. I've known plenty of people in personal and professional life that said that it was going to the doctor and getting that news of like, hey, if you don't change something now, this is the road you're on. Or they had the health scare. They knew, and a lot of them admitted, like, I wanted that, like, I wanted to hear it. I knew it was a thing, but habits die hard, and you know how cops
Yeah.
love change, right?
Yeah.
You kind of alluded to that earlier. Um, but then the other group is like there are a lot of, especially listeners here, like they're really trying to drive hard and be chasing performance and being their best and doing all the things. But even with that, that can be, from my personal experience and those close to me, that can be really frustrating when you're trying to figure out like what is the thing. So even something like, yeah, I want to go carnivore because my buddy had amazing results and feels great, but then I can start it, I can track how it's going, keep accountable to it, use the platform. At the same time, I can see if it is affecting my stress, or see if, yeah, maybe my sleep's not great for a couple days, but is it getting better? And then is it showing some sort of feedback loop to say like you could continue on this, or maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to describe utilization of the technology and being able to really geek out in the data if you want to, or just use it at the surface level to help with one aspect of your health and wellness and really drive your performance. And we know this just from personal experience. If you've spent any time in the job whatsoever, it's truly about performance. How are you doing out there when things go sideways? Are you able to manage that? And when you think back, when I think back on my career, and Erica, I'm going to assume that you're the same way, that, you know, when you were tired, when you hadn't eaten well, when you've worked a double and you haven't gotten to work out like you want to, stress at home was through the roof. It didn't take much to set you off, and you lost your
Hmm.
patience easier, you became frustrated easier, your critical decision making went out the window. So we know our performance is hindered by how we show up and how we're prepared. And so if we can do something to improve that physical and mental wellness, we know our performance is going to increase.
Yeah, that's huge. I'm thinking the personal anecdote of a time I've shared about this before, and this is not to knock any of these health strategies, I call them, but when I was working nights and I wasn't sleeping well and I was learning a lot about keto, and keto was the answer for everything, but also so was intermittent fasting, and my hard-headedness and wanting to push through discomfort and do the hard things and lift heavy weights and caffeinate and all that fasted workouts, the combination of it, I think a lot of people that are health enthusiasts would say like that's a really dangerous mix, especially with shift work and the
Yeah.
stressful nature of our job and working canine and going on long tracks. All these things mix in this way, but because I was a little selective and a cognitive bias of like finding all the articles and the forums of like why all this mixture should be fine, and if it sucks, you just have to keep pushing and you'll get there. I'll just say, a lot of people are like, why did you do that? But if I had a feedback loop, if I had a wearable and something where I was logging in and tracking my progress and seeing how poorly I was sleeping rather than just feeling it, and answering a questionnaire and potentially recognizing that, yes, once I started that a week in a month in, or 2 months in, I was quick to snap at just about everyone around me. Whereas like my, whatever score or kind of analytics showed way more preferable before I started down this health arduous journey. You're kind of
Yeah,
nodding your head there, yeah.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And we don't always recognize it, and to have something to help keep it in front of us, to help keep our attention on it is truly beneficial. And no matter what you think about technology, it's here to stay, right? And we probably look back over our careers, and we thought in-car cameras were a fad, and would ruin the profession. We thought body cameras were a fad and would ruin the profession. And tasers the same way. Anytime a new technology is introduced into our profession, it's met with quite a bit of skepticism, because that's who we are as individuals. That's how, again, that's how we're trained, right? We go back to in God we trust, everybody else we run through in T-lets, right? And
Hmm.
so it's just a matter of embracing what's there, using it to benefit yourself, whether it's all in or whether it's just a piece of it. But the end goal is, I need to perform better, and I want to be better, and I want to make sure that I can retire and live a satisfying life and not be burned out, or not find myself on the wrong end of those papers that come with the end of a career.
Yeah, yeah, and I love how you've already touched on it, and you kind of touched on it again, which is like there's no magic formula or magic tool, but like anything, more tools and resources when responsibly used and with the right intent can be absolutely a game changer. And I hear a lot of that. Like I hear how this type of tool and technology could be helpful to general population for sure, right? And at the same time, specifically, we realize that all the health things, if they can be helpful to general population, they are that much more necessary to first responders, to police. Um,
100%.
even talking earlier about you sharing your dive and building so much wellness and resilience in your departmental culture, it's like when we know people are subject to all these things and stresses and danger, what are we doing to, you know, combat it, help manage it, help support it, rehab, prehab? It's like we know a football, as far as pro sports go, football is very, very corrosive, right? It's very traumatic to the joints. Like there's large, physical, athletic adult men crashing into each other. And we know the incidence of injury are very high. So are we just dealing with it? Are we just like, yeah, that's it? Or are we no, like the pros are going through full days, weeks, in integrating all these different methodologies to help their people be the best they can be, which is absolutely what we need to be doing for us, our people, physically,
Yeah.
mentally.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It's our number one responsibility. Take care of
Yeah.
our people.
Yeah. So with Sworn, how do people learn more? Is this something that agencies reach out and they bring on for their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a brand new company. We just launched in March. Right now, we're selling to departments through an enterprise license, and allowing the department to take on the expense, and then allowing users to sign up, create their own account. Our model is we include all of the families for free, and getting family involved is ideal. It's vital. It's all of those positive attributes to success, because you're not going at it alone. The other part of Sworn, from a not going at it alone standpoint, is the department doesn't have any access to your data. They don't get to see that you're sleeping like crap, or that you're working out too hard. They don't get to see how you're eating or anything like that. It's really meant for the individual user, unless you choose to share it.
Hmm.
And we certainly encourage involving other people, whether it's your family, your spouse, your kids, whether it's your battle buddy at work, whatever that looks like. We encourage you to share your information with someone, so that when you get those alerts that you're not sleeping well, or that you've been exposed to some trauma, that person that you've chosen to share your data with gets that alert too, and says, hey, you need to go check on Jeff. He hasn't been sleeping well lately. And so it's just that added layer of accountability and support. It's liken it to proactive peer support.
Mm.
The way peer support is set up is you have peers who are trained to deal with and to help individuals, but they have to be asked. They have to know something's wrong. And so, by including them with your account, they get notified when you get notified. And so they don't have to wait for you to come ask them for help. That's automatic.
A couple things you just said, proactive peer support, and that's like, yeah, you can allow permissions for your buddy. You can make a mutual agreement when both of you are feeling great and you're coming on board. You're like, hey, like I'll be your accountability buddy, just like gym check-ins, but like, hey man, you haven't slept in 4 days. Like,
Right.
let's you good? Like, what's going on? Or just yeah, let's talk. Let's sit down. So I love that aspect, as well as like integrating the families. I think that is huge. It's just like we can do all these family support and relationship topics. We can have a speaker talk to all the sworn. But then what about the other half, right? The families, the older kids, like the people that could use that information, and does that get translated? And so when you have something like this that is affecting all these realms of lifestyle, to include how is home life and how that's reflecting and how are we sleeping? Like we share the same room. I know we share the same bed, right? And so to allow that opportunity for families to come on board, I think it's fantastic. And as well as where you shared, you don't have to share it with your agency. And I have heard of systems where they're integrating, and I'm not going to provide much commentary. I just want people to be aware of this, but they're integrating like health kind of conversations into like an early warning system. And I think there's probably a responsible way to do that and an irresponsible way to do that. So, but I like how you brought that up, because I'm sure that answers a lot of people's question. Is like, is that my information? Is it private? So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, 100%. All of that data is kept on the Amazon Web Cloud. It's CGIS compliant. It's encrypted. So it's about as secure as you can ask for in this day and age. Anyway, and I guess to follow up on what you said, for people who want to know more about it, sworn.ai is the website. Email me at jeff@sworn.ai, and we can have a conversation. Just getting the word out there is key right now, is because we're so new. We're trying to get our feet on the ground. And I really think it's where the health and wellness industry is going, especially for public safety, shift workers, people who are exposed to long hours, high stress, high trauma exposure. We have to do something different. We have to continue to build resources and help our people get the help they need.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Sir, I appreciate all the expansive conversations from wellness, culture, leadership, and then where wellness is going, integrating the future in AI. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Just that, I've said it time and time again, for those who are in leadership or those who aspire to go into leadership, I think recognizing your responsibility to your people is key. Being willing to take chances, bring new programs, be innovative isn't always comfortable, but ultimately will pay off in the end. And just a recognition of the culture that you work in, that we are exposed to a great deal of trauma and stress, that we have seen and will see the very worst of society, but that's not representative of all society. And so don't let that cloud the way you look at life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, sir. That's retired Chief Jeff Spivey. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.